would you have the fortitude to stick to your principles, even in the face of certain death? Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Book Reviews. I'm your host Kyron, here on the 28th of March 2024. And as you might surmise, the Mere Mortals Book Reviews is where I always alliterate anything amazing and abstract about artistic authors. No, I don't do that. But there is a bit of alliteration going on. In this very book here, we have Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by an unknown poet. We don't actually know who wrote this. This was written in the 14th, 15th century. It's about 100 pages of actual poetry / writing going on, with an extra 85 pages of introduction, explanation, notes, all these sorts of things at the end. So it'll take you about 2 to 4 hours reading, depending if you want to go over all of these additional things. It's a tale from Arthurian times, so King Arthur, knights, dragons, imagine all that sort of stuff. Castles, dames, monsters, merrymaking, sword fights, all those sorts of good things. And we have this main man here, Sir Gawain. Sir Gawain, who's one of the Knights of the Round Table. And basically they're at a New Year's Eve party, and a mysterious monster comes, an immortal monster at that. And this is being the Green Knight. And he comes and he challenges them. Sir Gawain is the one who must step up to the plate, and he willingly accepts this challenge. Basically, fights. It's not a fight per se, but he beheads this monster, and then the monster picks up his own head, and then basically talks some smack from his own head, holding it up, and is like, "Yo, in a year's time, you got to come meet me at this place, and I'm going to give you a dose of your own medicine." So essentially, he's got to travel and accept his own death willingly because he accepted this challenge. So we then follow him on his journeys. He has a rather arduous journey, find this green chapel, and then gets finds this castle. Luckily at the last stage of almost being on the verge of death kind of things. And he meets the lord of the castle. He merrymakes with the lord, and then love makes with the lady of the castle whilst the lord is out gallivanting and doing some hunting. So we then see him recuperating and finally going to meet his death, essentially, and then events transpire, which I won't spoil at this particular moment in the book review. Now, the book, as I mentioned, is alliterative verse, so this means it has a lot of these sections where each line in one of the stanzas usually tries to have the same words starting with the same letter. So, for example, we have, "Gawain was glad to begin the games in hall, but though the end be heavy, have no wonder, for if men are sprightly in spirit after strong drink." And so you can see there's usually 3 or 4 alliterative words in there. And this is going on about accents as well. I didn't particularly understand where the accents were. It wasn't really explained in the introduction or notes exactly how it works, so we'll leave that up. And it's only in the last 4 lines of each stanza where we'll actually have some rhyming going on. So it'll be, "And blithely hearts were beating, as into the hall came the lord. When Gawain gave him greeting, joy abounded at the board." So we just have these. It's a very unique style. I haven't actually seen poetry told in this manner before. All in all, there are 4 parts, although it calls them a fit. I'm not sure what fit actually stands for. And where there's 101 stanzas in total, with each stanza having, I'd say, about 15 to 20 lines, something like that in total. So that is the summary, the synopsis of the book. Now we have some spoilers coming up. Alert, alert, alert. What I like about these kind of books, and this is moving into the themes and some questions that arise, perhaps some morals even, and it's refreshing to read these books and realize that these were just people. They weren't paragons of perfection. Sir Gawain, for example, he fails to step up immediately when the knight challenges him in the Green Knight, this being in the New Year's Eve festival. They're kind of like a little bit of shock and like, oh, no one's really stepping up, and it takes King Arthur to step up, and then he steps up after him. And then also we see that he caves to temptation from this lovemaking with the lady of the court, where essentially she's coming into his bedchamber at night and being like, "Hey, you're so handsome, Sir Gawain. Like, let's make some proper love, not the lovemaking of the." And when I say lovemaking in those times referred to kind of flirtatious behavior between a man and woman, and being joking and things like this. But she wanted to have, like, the rough actual lovemaking going on. And so he doesn't cave into that temptation of sleeping with her, even though she is the most beautiful lady, even beyond Guinevere. But he does cave to the temptation of preserving his life, and so he accepts a gift from her and then fails to tell the lord of the castle that he's received this gift. So he kind of breaks a promise that he made. And, when I was a kid, my favorite series was Deltora Quest, which kind of, is this fantasy. It had dragons, it had knights in it as well, it had magical creatures and monsters. And I always loved this idea of an unfailing moral compass, or, the people going on the journey, and sure, they might have some mishaps here and there and make a mistake, but they were always very clear on their true aim and what they were going towards. And it also ties in with this, I don't know what you'd call it, a fascination perhaps that I have with doing the right things, even if no one is watching. It's kind of like a human version of, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? If a human does a bad thing in the woods and nobody knows about it and there's no repercussions, was a bad thing even done? And it's really interesting as we get more into the book, where he kind of eventually gets caught out via, I suppose, unpredictable circumstances. So once again, more spoilers coming up here. The lord of the castle, on the day of the actual, going to meet his fate, and essentially he has to just stand still as the Green Knight gets a free go at him with this huge battle axe that he has. And he goes to meet him, but the Lord, sends him on with the squire, and the squire's like, "Oh, I'm not going any further. You're going to have to find this thing yourself. It's really dangerous." He goes there, and he meets the Green Knight, and he's just, everything about this place is wrong. It feels like a place of demon worship and stuff. And we already know that the Green Knight is immortal and has, like, magical properties to him. And as we see them there, he faints once. He pretends to cut off his head, talks shit once again to Sir Gawain, does it again and stops short, and is like, "Oh, okay, no, I was just joking this time. This time I'm actually going to do it." And then he, goes with the full force of the blow, and he just nicks his neck. And what we actually find out was the Lord was the Green Knight all along. Shock and horror. And that the nick on his neck was not, if he had slept with his wife, he would have just cut his head off, because he wasn't a chivalrous knight. He wasn't fulfilling his knightly duties and things like this, staying true to his word and his promise. But he did slightly break his promise to the Green Knight, and so this is the small nick on his neck that he gets. So Gawain's a little bit mad at this trickery and things like this, but eventually he's like, "All right, well, I'm going home." Goes home with this girdle, which was the present he received from the lady of the castle. And that's kind of all's well that ends well, that sort of deal. There was a couple of learnings I thought that was really interesting from this, so I'm just going to jump into them here. The assault on your morals usually comes indirectly, which is a really interesting aspect of this book. So what we see with the Sir Gawain was the two times that he has, I guess, a moral failing was one in a moment of unpreparedness. So this being New Year's Eve, he's at a party, everyone is there, he's surrounded by friends. You'd think, complete safety. There's nothing. There's not going to be a need to step up and have a moral quandary at this point. It's a time for relaxation and chilling out. But the Green Knight bursts in, challenges the knights, and as a knight, you're meant to step up to the challenge, but no one did. And so this is where you can just see, okay, he was unprepared. And perhaps a knight should be prepared in all circumstances. And this is where his first moral failing came. And then the second one was, even though he was then in a situation with the lady of the castle, the Lord had gone out to go on these hunts, and so he was just going to there, chill out the castle, have some fun, have some food, drink, just rest up and recuperate. But the lady comes into his room, and that's already like alarm bells ringing, like, oh, this is okay, a little bit strange. And so even though he's very careful in this stage, alert bells, he's really looking out, moral failing, I can't cave into temptation here, I've got to be very careful. He does that really well, but then through this kind of side angle, she just an offhand comment from her about, oh, well, please just accept this gift. And, he's meant to essentially say no, like, no gifts. I can't accept anything from you. This will compromise you and me. And I have to tell the Lord and give the Lord everything, the Lord of the castle, everything that I receive at his home, I have to give back to him. Essentially, that was the promise that he made. But she says, this gift, it's heartfelt, it's true to my soul, it reflects, my love for you. It'll keep you safe. And this is where he's not expecting, the moral failing on this part is, he's very much being careful about accepting gifts from her love and things like this. But then when she just, inadvertently slips out, oh, it'll keep you safe. This is where he's like, oh, shit, I'm going to die tomorrow. If I have this girdle, perhaps it'll protect me. Maybe it does have some magic powers. And this is where he has a hopeful long shot of saving his life. And that's where the kind of moral failing comes in. And even though he should say no, that he wasn't expecting it from that angle. And so that's where he also has this moral failing. So that was a interesting aspect. You can be on your guard, you can be not on your guard, but it's the small sneaky things that can come in and trip you up when it comes to staying true to your morals. Another one, I suppose, was, this is a kind of personal one related to the character, and this is Sir Gawain. And he really beats himself up for these moral failings. He beats himself up for not stepping up, and he really beats himself up for, once the trickery is exposed, that he's alive and that he just has this small nick on his neck, that the girdle for him comes to symbolize his own moral failing. He should have gone to that situation and just faced up to his death. He shouldn't have had that, weakness of wanting to preserve his own life, the covetousness of wanting to stay alive. And he should have stuck to his, that's the whole point of being a knight. It's to face danger, to face the life-threatening circumstances with courage, with equanimity, with poise, with staying true to your promises and the deals and that you've made to yourself and things like this. And so he's really just like, he's beating himself up, and he's like, I don't even want this girdle, like, take it back. But the Lord of the castle, aka the Green Knight, is like, no, take it. Like, this isn't a bad thing. This for you should be a symbol of how you were righteous, and how you neglected the temptations of my lady, and how you stepped up to the plate, how you came and willingly met your own death. But he just didn't see it that way. He just continually was like, this is a bad thing. And even though he went back to the King Arthur's court and he told the story, he showed them the nick on his neck, he showed them the girdle, and everyone else is like, oh my God, Sir Gawain, you're crazy, man. You did it. You know what, inconsequential what you did with regards to the actual small moral failing on your part. And this is where it's just like, yeah, you know what, it's probably worthy that he doesn't beat himself up about it. There's just times where you have to let go of things and see things from other people's point of view. And I've seen this many times in my own life, where someone will be beating themselves up a small little thing, and everyone else, basically unanimous decision from the outside is, don't worry about that thing. Like, who cares? It means nothing. You're amazing. You're smart. And they're beating themselves up by like a small moral character or something they've done. And this is something I do myself as well. And the only thing that I guess in contrast to this would be perhaps that kind of obsessiveness over making sure you do the right thing is what allows you to stay true to your moral compass, to rise to the level that Sir Gawain did as, one of the knights of the Round Table, where if you do something wrong, you beat yourself up about it continually until it's ingrained in you that I'm never going to do this again. And that's the only kind of thing that I think could be a positive about that kind of attitude. But I mean, it's a lot of just, it feels like it's a lot of needless suffering as well, of just beating yourself up. Just let things go, just accept, hey, a small little thing here, but man, I did pretty good overall. The last one I had here was just being ethically sublime. I've always really loved this, ethically sublime, just reaching this top peak of sublimity, of, it's like transcending beyond what humans are capable. And this is what a knight is supposed to do, right? And to do that, it actually requires a little bit of conniving, a bit of planning, scheming, tactfulness. And we saw that Sir Gawain, for example, he had to be super tactful and skirt the boundaries of truth. It was just not what you would really expect from a knight. And the reason for this is he gets into this situation where he goes to the castle. He promises the Lord, yes, I'll be truthful with you, and I'll promise that whatever I receive whilst you're gone, I will give back to you. And then the sudden encounter with the lady comes in, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I have to reject her, but I can't be rude in my rejection. I have to keep her, even though she is the one doing something wrong, i.e. trying to tempt me. I don't want to embarrass her. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to embarrass the Lord. So he has to be really quiet, keep on the down low, and kind of reject her, but in a nice, friendly way, so she doesn't get insulted, and so that no one else finds out about it. So he basically love makes with her in the sense of joking, flirting, but always keeping a little bit of distance and never allowing her to initiate like physical contact other than like a kiss on the cheek as she's saying goodbye. And so that's where you're like, okay, well, that's interesting. He has to be super tactful. He can't, you'd think like an outright rejection would be the most knightly thing to do, but no, that's not the case. And then the other thing is, with the Lord of the Castle, this is where he's meant to be outright truthful with him. He made a promise, this sort of thing. But he has to give him these kind of kisses in return because he received a kiss from the lady. And so he very much skirts the truth. He doesn't say why he's kissing him. He doesn't give the context, the details behind this. And I found that, I had a disillusionment as a kid when I tried to be good. I heard people say, if you want this in life, you have to act this way. Do the thing that people tell you. And the thing that they say is, to be kind, to be nice, to have courage, to whatever it is, and this will lead to the outcome that you want. And when I tried to do that, not only did it not lead to the outcome that I wanted, but it sometimes would lead to the opposite of it. And I was just like, well, this makes no sense. Am I meant to be good? Am I, if being good is meant to get me where I'm going, it's not working. So what's the go? I've been told a lie. This doesn't make any sense. And this is where I think something like a 5 to 10% acknowledgement of practicality is required. That to reach the good outcome that everyone says is a good outcome, that you can look back on with pride at how you behaved, and that the good things happened in the end. It does require like 5 to 10% of skirting the truth a little bit, and you're not outright lying, you're not being deceptive, and you're not also falling into the trap of the means justify the end. No, the means definitely do matter, but you can't be idealistic. And I think that's one thing that occurs to me a lot as well, is I'm definitely idealistic about some things, and it's good to just remember you've got to do the good thing. You've got to have the courage. You've got to have the moral rock steadfastness, but you also just have to have a little bit of acknowledgement that, okay, some situations are going to require me to be a little bit slippery, a little bit slimy, but you got to get back on path really quick after that. You can't go down the slippery slope of, well, I lied to the Lord of the Castle and that was good, so therefore I should just lie about everything and that'll work out, because it doesn't work out, and you get into all sorts of bad situations from that. So that's the main things that I took from this book. Let's jump on to the author, perhaps some extra details. The author, as I mentioned, an unknown poet. This is from the late 14th, early 15th century, from tracing. I don't know how the the people have done it, and it came from a manuscript. You see an image on your screen right now. What they do know about this poet was he knew French and Latin, so he was relatively educated for the time. He lived in the Cheshire region of England and probably had the last name of Massey. And there's a couple of, I was reading like the notes in this book, I was reading some Wikipedia articles, and essentially I would just be repeating what they were saying. So I don't have anything more to add to that, as yeah, it's just an unknown person lost to time. But it does raise a point about history and language. So this was written in Middle English, and there's a small extract here from the original poem. So I'll give you a taste of perhaps what it would have sounded like. And there's a couple of characters in here with it's like a P with an extra bit on the top, and what looks like the number 3. And I'm not sure how I pronounce those, so I'm just going to use them as a P and a 3. So it would be something like this. Of a king Capados, Pat closes his swire, P main of Pat main oars, much to hit like, well cresped and semmed with knots full money, folded with will filled o'er, abouty per fire greeny. So you can kind of see like the word green, the word money, the word with, the word semmed, it was probably like hemmed or something like that. There's enough in there where you can kind of read it out, even in just modern English. It would be a struggle to read this and get the full story, but you can certainly see that it is a type of English in there. And like modern life, history and language is incredibly complex, and narrowing it down to single actions of who this author was, what was their motivation, what is the direct translation of this word or that word, and the manuscript itself is damaged and old, so there's certain characters which are hard to kind of make out, and you have to kind of guess what it is. So there's no simplistic one-stop answers to who wrote this, what is this, the actual translation, true to its word, the letter by letter, word by word. No, it can't be. And it's intriguing to note as well that life is more mundane, and that stories like this about the nightly stuff would be, it gives us a glimpse into what perhaps there would have been a little taste of. And we do have armor from those days. We do have castles, obviously, and historical physical evidence. And then things like this, it's worth noting that for all of the moral righteousness, for these instances of where Sir Gawain has to be on his guard, on his toes, probably most of his life was really mundane. It would have been a lot of just hanging around, waiting in the cold, for example, or discussions about taxes and land ownership, or their lovemaking, for example, would be kind of like The Bachelorette nowadays. There's these small snippets of drama where people are all getting together for a festival or for a party, and there's intrigue and gossiping and back and forth and things like this. But a lot of that is kind of artificial staging to make it happen, and that there just wouldn't be as much as excitement as you would find in books like this. So definitely just worth recognizing. And I'll talk about why I'm talking about this in a little bit as well. But these sorts of books, they're fun. They give you an insight into history, but obviously the history would have been very different at the actual time. I very much doubt there was an immortal Green Knight monster. So let's jump into the summary. Similar book, maybe some recommendations. This is one of those books where I think it's actually worthy of reading the introduction and supporting pages, if you're interested in the history behind it. So the actual tale itself, the story, it's okay. I would say that Del Toro Quest, I mentioned that before, by Emily Rodda, that's more interesting. Even nowadays, I would probably prefer to read Del Toro Quest over this poem. But this is intriguing for the history behind it, for knowing about Gawain's eternal jewel, how the poem was presented as a play, notes on Arthurian matters, so it gives you more of an insight into, okay, Gawain began as an Irish hero and not an English one, and what did Morgan the Fay have to do with this? What about Merlin? And notes on Arthurian matters, on all of these just like the symbolism of the pentagram, for example, the hidden behind the scenes of the Arthurian Knights times, and the author himself, the manuscript, the language, that's what makes this come alive. That's what makes this poem interesting and worthy of remembering, because the actual poem itself, it's a relatively simplistic story. It's not going to blow your mind. So definitely has encouraged me, I think, to keep more of an eye out for other old classics from this period, because I actually did enjoy getting into this. And the poem, yeah, it was okay. I'd give that maybe a, I don't know, 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. It was okay. But with the additions of all of this backstory and history behind it, I'm going to give it a very solid 7 out of 10. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by an unknown poet. Similar books, recommendations. Evgeny Onegin by Alexander Pushkin kind of reminded me of this, because it did have those kind of moral type of things. It did have a jewel in it. It did have that, a jewel as in like, bang, bang, bang with pistols, which is the equivalent of, I guess, of them doing it with swords, like it was happening here. And you're meant to stand still in a duel like that as well. So I think there's some overlap with that. And there was obviously like beautiful ladies and intrigue and things like that. And I would also probably say Beowulf, just because it has an unknown poet as well. So it goes back to that time period. My reading of 14th, 15th century, honestly, from the period of probably like 500 AD to 1600, 1700, my reading has been rather lacking in that time period. So definitely something I need to work on myself as well. And I was talking a lot about history as well, because I found this channel called Pre-Modernist on YouTube, which has been going into a lot of just like historical context of what it would be like in the Middle Ages. So if you were to time travel back then, what would it be like? And I would just actually give that channel a shout out. It's worth jumping into and seeing. So that's a recommendation there. Let's jump on to the final aspects we have here. V for V, value for value. This is a value for value podcast. You can support the show through time, talent, and treasure. Time, you could reach out like my friend Vratislav has again, and just I just want to reiterate that, doing these can be rather lonely at times, and receiving feedback from you at home is very much appreciated. To know what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, just giving a thanks for creating these. Perhaps it really does mean a lot to myself and to Juan as well. You can also leave a book recommendation, things that you think I would enjoy. Those are highly valuable. That's some talent there. And then treasure, you can share. Well, I suppose you can do this via the PayPal link down below. That's probably the easiest, most effective method. And if you want to send in a boostergram, which is sending in a message with some Satoshis attached in a modern podcast app. So if you're on the audio version of this, would also recommend doing that as well. So there was a comment as well on the YouTube by a guy named John Manoli, and this was on the Emile Zola's book of The Debacle, and he was just thanking me for saying like, hey, I'd never heard of this author in this time period, which I believe that was around 1850s, 60s. That was when the Prussian and French were going to war. That kind of time period as well, he was just like fascinated by. So yeah, definitely want to do some more books about this kind of middle section of human history, and when I say middle section, I mean kind of from when human writing was coming first up in the early BCs to nowadays, so the 1000 time period. You can also just share this with someone. That's a great way to help support the podcast as well. A reminder here, I'm live 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday. We're going to be going to a couple just pre-recorded ones, because I'm actually traveling to Brazil very, very shortly, in a week's time, actually. I'll be mid-flight in a week's time. And so Juan's going to put out a couple of podcasts in my stead. And then I hope to be still doing these around the same time whilst traveling. So just check out for that. I really do appreciate if you come join in. You'll see that on the live pending tag on your podcast app or on YouTube, if you want to join in for those. Not really any people joining in today. That's all okay, and all good. So we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. What books were coming up? One is doing one on Japanese death poems. And honestly, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm going to start reading on the Kindle, so my reading is going to not be using the library and things like that. So I'm just going to kind of have free reign and see what comes up and see what I enjoy. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining in. And hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Ciao for now. Kyron out.